and presentation, and that is that we bring a little bit of culture and fun and a bit of dialogue and sharing of our interests to as many people as possible. And I'm just thinking, do you think, Ciara, will we start soon? I know that Brian's talk takes about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And we're going to have Brian with us later to answer any questions. So if you think of anything while the talk is on, maybe jot it down and we can ask Brian at the end. And Brian, he's a great historian. He's written some very interesting books. And he was also head of the Jesuit Archives. So I'm sure there's lots of interesting things we can find out at the end. I'm sure he'd be willing to share his knowledge with us. So what do you think, Ciara? Shall we?
Certainly, yeah, certainly. Well, just to say that for anybody who just to let everybody know that so Brian has prepared a special talk that will be shared with us now. It was filmed in Campion Hall in Oxford, and especially for the Casa della Cultura. So we're very, very grateful to him for doing that. And the title of this talk is An Elizabethan Conversion, An Irish Layman Goes to Italy in 1595-97. And this, I believe, forms part some of the research that Brian had been working on. So this is part of a body of work, and he's presenting it to us tonight. And so we're delighted to have this opportunity to listen to him, but we're also equally delighted and very grateful to him for doing this for us and for joining us later on, so we'll have an opportunity to discuss and ask questions. So I agree, I think we should begin so that we have time to have a chat afterwards. Now let me see. So I'm just going, bear with me, folks.
Yeah.
There's always a wee bit of, nervousness.
Ciara?
Yes?
I'll do the sharing, don't worry about it. I got it.
Great, lovely.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay, I'll share now, everyone. Thank you.
Yes, lovely.
Our Australian director.
This is the point of the meeting where people start shuffling their papers, as you go through your notes.
Yes, indeed. Here we go.
Hello, my name is Father Nick Austin, and we're here in the library of Campion Hall, the Jesuits' home and a centre of learning and research in the University of Oxford. As Master of the Hall, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this talk by Father Brian Mac Cuarta. Father Brian is a member of the Irish province of the Society of Jesus, and he's a fellow in early modern history here at Campion Hall. His talk is entitled An Elizabethan Conversion. An Irish Layman Goes to Italy 1595 to 1597. And this talk is based on research that Brian conducted here at the Hall in 2017. It's a talk that is organised by the Casa della Cultura Irlandesi, the Irish Cultural Institute in Rome. Over to you, Father Brian.
At about 5 o'clock in the afternoon of Whit Sunday 1595, two young men travelling together boarded a ship outside Dublin. There was a delay in lifting anchor. Letters from the Lord Deputy in Dublin Castle to the government in London were late in arriving. What became the 9 Years' War, 1594 to 1603, between the Gaelic Ulster lords and the English crown had started the previous year. After 2 days, the ship landed at a fishing village outside Liverpool. The two proceeded south towards London, stopping off to visit the younger man's father in a small village in Derbyshire. On the English south coast, they were uncertain how to proceed to the continent. After some adventures, including hearing news about a possible sailing while drinking in an inn, and hiring horses to race across country to another port, they got a passage with Dutch sailors. At sea, they had a narrow escape from pirates. In this way, they reached the Dutch coast. The younger man, Philip Draycott, was aged 22. He came from a staunchly Catholic family with an extensive network in the English Midlands. From the 1580s, they had suffered severe fines for their refusal to attend services of the established church. Philip was among the earliest students at the Jesuit-run college at Saint-Omer in the Spanish Netherlands, just opened in 1593. Typical of the refuge which some Elizabethan Catholics found in the less oppressive regime in Ireland, Draycott had spent the past year or so in the secluded household of a well-disposed landowner in rural Ireland. Desiring to become a priest, he was on his way to Rome for training in the English college. However, the journey to Rome was long and hazardous, taking about 3 months. It was safer to travel together. Henry Pearse, the second man, was aged about 26. He too wanted to get to Rome. His English father, adherent of the established church, had been a military commander on the frontiers of Gaelic Ireland. He had acquired from the Crown extensive lands and premises of an Augustinian priory located in the Irish Midlands, beyond the Pale. Here the young family lived. Friendship with Catholic laymen sparked his son Henry's interest in Catholicism, which in turn led to his journey to Rome. Christopher Nugent, Baron Delvin, was Henry's neighbour and revered mentor. While at Cambridge, the Baron had composed an Irish language grammar for Queen Elizabeth. Further, Henry's sister Mary was married to a Catholic, James Jance, a leading Dublin merchant and alderman. By the integrity of their lives, as Henry related, these men made Catholicism attractive. Jans, with his continental trading experience, arranged the finance of the Roman journey eventually undertaken by the two young men. Their expedition exemplified the close interaction between the beleaguered recusant or Catholic community in England and those offering refuge in Ireland. While travelling, Henry diligently wrote down dates and places and curious sites and monuments. On his return home to Ireland, these jottings provided the basis of the travel account which has survived, entitled A Discourse of Henry Pearse, His Travels, written by himself. Because of the religious wars then raging in France, Henry and Philip decided to travel via the Netherlands and northern Germany to Hamburg, and then proceeded south. Once they had a dramatic escape from thugs in an inn. These demanded gold and were wielding hatchets. The travellers refused and barracked themselves in their room, using the horse saddles to support the door. Eventually, they escaped their pursuers by climbing out the window. Having crossed the Alps, on the 31st of August 1595, the two travellers reached Trent, and Henry observed, quote, "At the river which runs through Trent does Germany end and Italy begins." Thereafter, it took them just over 3 weeks to reach Rome. The two companions spent 6 days in Venice, quote, accounted the richest city in Italy. As well as noting St. Mark's Basilica, the 6 synagogues, and the glass-making enterprise at Murano, Piers was intrigued by a tour of the armoury, with the numerous workmen employed there, and marvelled at the swords, naval vessels, and cannon. For art, however, he evinced little interest. An inland waterway linked Fusina on the Venetian lagoon and the university city of Padua. He describes the barge journey and the mechanical feature whereby the vessel was raised and lowered on the water. Henry appreciated music, especially singing. He grew up on the cultural border between the Gaelic world and the English Pale, the territory of those in Ireland who identified as the English in Ireland, where the English language was common. The family's neighbour was Christopher Nugent, Baron Delvin, leader of a distinguished lordly family with a large connection, loyal to the English crown, but also anchored in the Gaelic world. As an adolescent, young Henry was captivated by the broad culture and deep Catholic faith of this aristocrat. The boy doubtless spent time in this noble household, where music, as well as poetry and scholarship, were cultivated. Young Piers acquired the musical education which was standard at this social level in contemporary England. He enjoyed singing and could perhaps play the lute. Music added to the prestige which Italian culture enjoyed in the Elizabethan and Jacobean era. While passing through several cities of northern Italy, in Padua, Henry was captivated, quote, by very sweet music, unquote, he heard by chance at a doorway. Those inside noticed his appreciation and invited him to spend an evening of song with the household, indicating that Henry was used to singing madrigals, a song composition usually for 4 single voices. At Padua also, the travellers met 2 young grandsons of William Cecil, who had been Queen Elizabeth's chief minister. These men in their early 20s were studying at the University of Padua, the best university of all Italy, Piers enthused, a popular destination for young educated Elizabethans. Some days later, the travelling companions reached Bologna, where the English musician John Dowland encountered Henry. The musician had already published a collection of compositions for voice and lute. Subsequently, Dowland was recognised as among the foremost English composers of the Elizabethan and Jacobean era. When the two met, however, Dowland's career was at a low ebb. The year before, he was turned down for a post as one of Queen Elizabeth's lutenists. Bitterly disappointed, Dowland felt that his Catholic faith was a consideration in this rejection. He left England to take up work at 2 ducal courts in Germany. His goal, however, was to learn from the Italian masters, especially Luca Marenzio, the celebrated madrigal composer. And so, in 1595, Dowland visited cities in northern Italy, while in Florence he became embroiled in the political intrigues of some English Catholics living in the city. There had been many plots to replace Elizabeth with a Catholic monarch. Dowland took fright and decided to curtail his Italian trip and return to Germany. From Nuremberg, in early November 1595, he wrote to Sir Robert Cecil, then Elizabeth's chief minister. He reported on these developments in Italy, disavowing any participation in disloyal activities and protesting his loyalty to the Queen. In a long, rambling, emotional letter, the composer was seeking to ingratiate himself with Cecil by sharing information on the Queen's subjects abroad. In this context, Dowland noted his encounter in Bologna with Henry Pearse from Ireland. Using the postal network linking various cities, Henry and Philip travelled by horseback. Earlier, at Augsburg in southern Germany, they met, quote, the Post of Venice, which provided horses for them and their luggage to Venice at the cost of £5 17 shillings. At Florence, he noted, quote, the Post of Rome, which similarly supplied them with fresh horses. They spent 4 nights in Florence, where he noted the churches and palaces and praised Cosimo de' Medici for the institutions he had founded. It took 5 days to travel from Florence to Rome. On the evening of 25th of September, over 3 months after leaving Dublin, the two men reached Rome. Young Philip was admitted as a seminarian in the English college. After 2 years of the philosophy course, Philip entered the Jesuit novitiate in Rome, but died there a year later in August 1598, one of many students who in those times succumbed to the unhealthy summer climate of Rome. The presence of spies for Elizabeth's government created anxiety and mistrust among the English-speaking community in Rome. On first arriving in the city, Henry became friendly with an English ecclesiastic, Richard Hadcock. It emerged that they had mutual acquaintances in Ireland. Hadcock's support was vital in helping Henry negotiate several hazards. The first was to gain entrance to the English College, as a recommendation was needed. On Hadcock's word, Pearse was admitted as a guest. The college had been established in 1579 as a seminary to train priests, in the premises which housed the English hospice for pilgrims dating back to 1361. The older role of providing hospitality for English visitors to Rome continued. The revolt of the Ulster chiefs against the crown was then raging in Ireland. The Gaelic Irish in Rome were presenting the conflict as a Catholic crusade. When Henry distanced himself from this particular stance, some Irish used his family background in the Crown's military service in Ireland to suggest he was an English spy and delated him to the Roman Inquisition. Henry's friend Hadcock, however, advised him to present himself directly to the Inquisition. Having indicated his desire to become a Catholic, a friendly conversation with the Cardinal Inquisitor ensued. Henry made the customary abjuration of heresy, visited the Sette Chiese, the 7 major basilicas, and was received into the Catholic Church. Father Hadcock was Henry's support when facing opposition from some English seminarians who resented his presence, alleging he was Irish and so ineligible to be admitted to the college. However, admission was in fact for those of English parentage, and on this point Henry's place was secure. Thereafter, he studied the entry-level programme of logic and physics with the English Jesuit teachers. The students used to rise at 4:30 a.m., then prayer, mass, and private study. After breakfast, walking together in twos, wearing the distinctive English college uniform, they proceeded to the Collegio Romano for their lectures, returning for lunch at 11 a.m. There followed further study and daily tutorials on the materials covered in class, a set time for conversation, supper, litanies of the saints, and then bed at 9 p.m. On Wednesdays, they had, quote, a vineyard day. After walking about 14 miles or 22 kilometres to the 7 churches, in the afternoon they recreated in the college's vineyard on the Palatine Hill, with sports followed by a good supper before returning to the college. In July and August, because of intense heat, they had classes only in the morning. An allegation was widespread in England, Pearse wrote, that the scholars were plotting rebellion against Queen Elizabeth. Pearse, however, was at pains to assert that in their recreations there had been no talk of insurrection, but that they merely prayed for the monarch's conversion. Another echo of contemporary interest was the attention Henry devoted to the sea battle of Lepanto off southern Greece, a battle which occurred in 1571. Here, the combined Catholic forces defeated the Ottoman fleet. The Catholic allies included Spain, several Italian cities, and the Pope. The Roman aristocrat Marcantonio Colonna played a prominent role in leading the papal galleys. Pearse was one of the earliest writers to draw on the account of this major battle in the massive tome by the Englishman Richard Knollys, entitled The General History of the Turks, with all the notable expeditions of the Christian princes against them, published in 1603. Pearse devotes just over half of the entire text of his travel memoir to a description of Rome under various headings: churches, religious processions, the national colleges established from the mid-16th century for training clergy, the city's 7 hills, thermal springs, gates, highways, bridges, courts, and magistrates. He was present at various papal ceremonies at which Pope Clement VIII presided, including the consistory for creating new cardinals in June 1596, the consecration as bishop of Camillo Borghese, who subsequently became Pope Paul V, in the Sistine Chapel in May 1597, and the Holy Week ceremonies. For the descriptive section on Rome's churches and antiquities, Pearse drew extensively on published material. About 1/3 of the discourse was based on one of the most popular guides to Rome in the 1580s and the 1590s, Girolamo Francini, Le cose meravigliose dell'alma città di Roma, first published in Venice in 1588. 10 Italian editions followed in 7 years. Pearse used Francini's guidebook in several ways. This publication incorporated a work on Roman antiquities by the renowned architect Andrea Palladio, entitled L'Antichità di Roma, published in Venice in 1554. From the range of themes offered by Palladio, Pearse selected several for inclusion in his discourse: the 7 hills, thermes and bathing houses, the principal gates, highways, bridges, aqueducts, amphitheatres, theatres, marketplaces, triumphal arches, palaces, courts and magistrates, and some remarks on the antiquity and population size of the city. Occasionally, Pearse updates Palladio by inserting contemporary details. Regarding the hills, Pearse added a description of statues on the Capitoline. On aqueducts, he appends a note on the reconstruction by Pope Sixtus V. For the marketplaces, he includes Piazza Navona, the custom of placing scurrilous texts at the Pasqui monument, and the burnings of heretics at Campo dei Fiori. To the section on palaces, Pearse adds Castel Sant'Angelo and the residences of various recent cardinals. Regarding St. Peter's, Pearse integrates some details on the roles of ecclesiastics participating in a papal mass. He also refers to the Vatican Library and notes that many of the books were chained. Quote, "Whoever steals a book out of this library cannot be absolved by any man but by the Pope himself." Unquote. For the Vatican Palace, he notes that he himself saw some of the cardinals on a visit who were attended, he asserted, by a retinue of 200 horses and 100 coaches. A second major use of Francini was in regard to the churches. Pearse listed 73, in which he gives information on saints, relics, Lenten station days, and other festive days on which indulgences may be gained by visiting the church in question. Here, as elsewhere in the discourse, his apologetical intent is evident. This editorial emphasis conforms to the author's overarching polemical concern. He wanted to present the distinctiveness of contemporary Catholicism in opposition to Protestant objections. In the antiquity of Christian Rome, he sees an argument in favour of the contemporary 16th century Roman Church as the uniquely authentic expression of Western Christianity. He also pays frequent homage to the early Christian martyrs of Rome, noting, for example, that in the Church of St. Sebastian are buried, quote, 174,000 martyrs put to death by the wicked emperors, martyrs of which there were 18 popes, unquote. There are eyewitness accounts of some features of Roman life in the mid-1590s. A cardinal's funeral at the Jesuit Church, the central global government of the Jesuits under their Father General, with his 4 geographically based assistants. He refers to recent missionary successes in Japan, quote, Portugal and Japan, which is a mighty region lately converted by the Jesuits, unquote. To combat the levity associated with the days of Carnival just before Lent, the Jesuits instituted preaching in their church morning and afternoon. Pearse also described the charitable institution of Santo Spirito, quote, the most famous, richest and largest hospital that is in the whole world, unquote. It included a hospital, later grouping, which accompanied the Earls in 1608, died there, and an orphanage. At the entrance door on the street, any newborn infant placed on a revolving table would be accepted into the orphanage. He saw up to 500 children arranged by age going in procession on St. Mark's Day. On another occasion, he witnessed 140 older girls in procession, each of them accompanied by a Roman matron who provided the girl's dowry. Noting the prevalence of courtesans in Rome, he referred to measures, largely ineffectual, to expel these women. If discovered in a coach, their coach and horses were to be confiscated, sold, and the monies given to the house for reformed prostitutes. Pearse experienced the particularly fierce heat wave of 1596, relating that straw on the street used to burn with a high temperature. In that summer, he alleges, 15,000 people died of the fever. Every day, between 20 and 30 died in the Santo Spirito Hospital. Good music featured in Henry's experience of Rome. For the patronal feast day of the Church of St. Thomas, attached to the English College, there was, quote, extraordinary good music, and at those times the singing men of the Pope's chapel do assist them for the setting forth of the choir with many excellent voices, on the which days divers of the best cardinals in Rome and other men of great account do resort thither, unquote. Excellent music was performed by the German college students at the Church of St. Apollinarius. Of the 142 churches in Rome, he noted that, quote, at every of their festival days and stations, these have excellent music, unquote, suggesting that he himself had visited many, perhaps for the devotions organised in a different church for each day of Lent. Intriguingly, he refers to a prototype of an Irish college near the church of Santa Lucia, beside the palace of Cardinal Mattei, then protector of the Irish, quote, a place of residence for the priests and scholars who come from Ireland, where they have handsome lodgings and other good commodities, unquote. While he noted some of the monuments of pagan Rome, he himself measured the Colosseum, his focus was on ancient Christian Rome and the testimony of the many martyrs of the pagan era. These validated, in his eyes, the authenticity of the Roman Church of his own times. A particular strength of his account of Rome is rare, if not unique, eyewitness descriptions of various processions, especially in Holy Week, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and concluding with the early morning Easter drama produced by the Spanish Confraternity of St. James. These clearly made a deep impression on him. On the evening of Holy Thursday, he observed a procession through the city towards St. Peter's, comprising 13 confraternities, each starting from their own chapel, and each with a band, quote, served with very good music, unquote. In the procession, after the cross, there appeared a series of silk flags on silver staves depicting stages of the Passion, starting with the agony in the garden and ending with the crucifixion. There followed an image of Our Lady dressed in black and images of the instruments of the Passion, crown of thorns, whip, spear, nails, and sponge. In the darkness, many wax candles provided light. There followed a group of several hundred disciplinants, men whipping themselves, the blood running onto the street. Next came several hundred men of religious orders, singing litanies and reciting prayers. The cardinals and nobility took up the rear, followed by the populace, quote, which did throng after them through the street, unquote. Passing by the Ponte Sant'Angelo, they entered the Vatican and reached the Chapel of St. Paul, decorated with hangings of black velvet and lit by 500 candles. Having visited the replica of Jesus' tomb, the crowd descended into St. Peter's, where the relics of the Passion were displayed. The people knelt and cried aloud to God for mercy. True to his desire to present Roman liturgical life to his readers, for Good Friday he provides a description of the evening service of Tenebrae, where, in place of the usual music of voices and instruments, the sacred texts were instead, quote, sung in a low, lamentable fashion, with readings from the Lamentations of the prophet Jeremiah. At the end of every psalm, one candle was extinguished, leaving the chapel finally in total darkness. His experience of the Easter Vigil was particularly vivid. At the Gloria, pictures in the church were uncovered, and, quote, the organs, sackbut, cornets, and voices sound out most heavenly melody together. The bells do ring, and the great ordnance or cannon of Castel Sant'Angelo does shoot off. Just after midnight, he observed the dramatic performance produced by the St. James Confraternity of Spaniards in Rome, held in the spacious Piazza Navona. 2 towers were erected, with ropes linking these and various palaces on the piazza. 3 double choirs were placed on scaffolds, at a distance one from the other. 1,000 candles lit up the square. A procession, led by a Spanish bishop carrying the Blessed Sacrament, entered, followed by prelates and religious. An angel descended from a tower, brandishing a light, and set on fire an artificial devil. At this, the first choir sang in praise for the destruction of Satan, accompanied by the sound of many musical instruments. Fireworks were set off from the 2 towers. Towards the centre of the piazza, a naval battle was then enacted, and the galleys of the King of Spain clashed with those of the Turks, a reference to the Battle of Lepanto, south of Greece, just 25 years before. The Turkish galleys were blown up, leaving victory to the Spaniards. The second choir gave thanks for this victory. At the far end of the piazza, a large round globe signifying the world was set on fire, representing the Last Judgment. The third choir then sang in a suitably sorrowful way, depicting, quote, the lamentable times and the afflicted state of men on that day. The sound of shot rang out from the 2 towers. To conclude the performance, all choirs and instruments struck up, quote, a melodious and joyful song for the victorious resurrection of the only Son of God. The bishop ascended the stairs to the church, and the two towers were turned, quote, into scorching flames. Guns and cannon were set off, denoting the Lion of the tribe of Judah and the liberation of the souls in death. Quote, break open the gates of hell, conquer the dragon, and redeem the souls which were in prison. Unquote. The writer also witnessed the city's Corpus Christi procession in June. Starting from St. Peter's, the Pope walked bareheaded under a canopy, carrying the Blessed Sacrament. Henry was close by because he noted the tears on Clement's cheek. The canopy was carried by 8 noblemen, a signal honour for each individual and his family, closely observed as an indication of the family's ranking within the Roman aristocracy. In 1608, for example, that honour was given to the Ulster Earls O'Neill and O'Donnell, just weeks after their arrival in Rome, indicating their status as prominent Catholic princes at the centre of the Catholic world. The Pope was followed by dozens of cardinals, bishops and prelates, friars and monks, with over 100 members of the papal household, choirs, and then nobles and the common people. The procession passed by Ponte Sant'Angelo through streets decked with hangings of rich cloth and sheets of canvas attached to timber masts back to St. Peter's. After the papal blessing, the Pope was, quote, carried in a velvet chair upon 12 men's shoulders, blessing the people as he passed by them, he shedding tears with the triple crown on his head, unquote. The Roman Jews also attracted Henry's attention. These, since 1555, had been constrained to live in the ghetto. Distinguished by their obligatory yellow hats, he noted that they traded in cast-off clothes and rags. With the aim of eliciting conversions to Christianity, 1 out of every household was compelled to attend a sermon held weekly, which some Jesuits among other clergy gave. Every year, Piers noted, some converted. In fact, at the magnificent baptistry associated with Emperor Constantine in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, Piers witnessed the baptism of several Roman Jews. Earlier, he referred to the synagogues while visiting Florence and Venice. Later, when sailing between Genoa and Alicante in Spain, among his fellow passengers, he noted the presence of several Jews whose identity was disguised, for they were not legally permitted to be in Spain. Henry made a special effort to visit a neighbour from Ireland, Francis Nugent, the Capuchin, who was on a visit to Rome in 1596. Nugent subsequently introduced the Capuchin order into Ireland. In mentioning the renowned friar, Piers paid homage to the baronial family of Nugent. The family's head, Christopher Baron Delvin, who died in prison in 1602, influenced Piers as an adolescent towards a positive appreciation of Catholicism. After 2 years in the city, Piers left Rome. Henry paid for his stay by means of monies which an Irish priest living in Rome had left in the custody of the English College administration. This man had died in the city some years beforehand, leaving a legacy to his family in Clonmel, southeast Ireland. Henry undertook to pay this legacy on his return to Ireland. Henry went to visit Pope Clement VIII in the company of Jesuit Robert Persons and Father Hadcock. The Pope blessed him and gave him some travel money, following the practice for young priests going home to serve in their native countries. In line with papal protocol, at this encounter, Henry kneeled and kissed the pontiff's feet. On the 15th of October 1597, a group set off from the English College on horseback. This was a regular occurrence, following an established route, for these were priests returning to England after their studies. It was arranged that Henry would join this contingent so that he could visit the shrine of Loreto and include a visit to Milan. Among the travellers was Reginald Bates, aged 28, quote, "a man of great virtue and my special friend," unquote. In the internal dispute which had recently plagued the English College, Bates and Pearse were among those who had supported the Jesuit administration of the college. 5 days later, the group reached Loreto, the Marian shrine located on the Adriatic coast northeast of Rome. It was among the most popular pilgrimage destinations of the early modern world. For many, a Roman pilgrimage was not complete without a visit to Loreto. As travel to the Holy Land became restricted under Muslim rule, in the late 13th century, the sanctuary of Loreto emerged, focused on the house of Mary at Nazareth. The house, it was believed, had been miraculously transported to Italy. The crippled, the sick, the poor, but also nobles and other foreign pilgrims all thronged to Loreto. In 1554, Pope Julius III asked the Jesuits to serve as confessors to pilgrims, and they established a community there for this purpose. Like many visitors, Henry was enthralled by the place. The group spent 3 days there. They were able to visit the treasury where the many rich gifts given by noble and royal pilgrims were stored. As a pilgrim, Henry availed of confession and attended Mass. As elsewhere, he noted the fine singing and instrumental music which accompanied the liturgy. His account of Loreto comprises a lengthy section of his travel memoir. He gives a synopsis of the sanctuary's history taken from the book by the Roman Jesuit Orazio Torsellini, first published in 1598. Pilgrims from Ireland visited Loreto on their way to Rome. In 1587, a bishop paid a visit in thanksgiving for his escape from Calvinist persecutors. The Ulster Earls, O'Neill O'Donnell and their followers, came in 1608. 2 unemployed soldiers, travelling from the Spanish Netherlands, arrived in 1609. And Richard Nugent, Earl of Westmeath, who was going blind, together with his family, in 1635. From Ancona, the English College group took 5 days to reach Bologna, and then 6 days to travel north to Milan. At Piacenza, they crossed the River Po, quote, with a strange device of boats chained together, unquote, reaching Milan on the 3rd of November. Pearse stayed in the city for 4 days, marvelling at rich decorations of various churches and the tombs of Saints Dominic and Ambrose, among others. The imposing military fortification housing the garrison of the Spanish crown took his attention. At Milan, Pearse parted company from the contingent who were returning to England. Armed with a recommendation from the consummate networker, Robert Persons, Henry was travelling on to Spain to visit some of the recently established English colleges there. To that end, he took 4 days to travel south from Milan across the Apennines to Genoa, where he met several of the English students sent by Father Robert Persons from Rome to Spain, men with whom he would have lived while in Rome. In Genoa, he stayed for 2 weeks before setting sail for Alicante in Spain. From his first days in Rome, Henry had struck up a friendship with his Roman inquisitor, Cardinal Penelle. In recompense for carrying letters to his brother in Genoa, the prelate paid for Henry's sea passage from Genoa to Spain. After about 6 months in the English College Seville, for the voyage home to Ireland, Pearse made contact with the Drogheda wine merchant Sebastian Fleming, who was trading in southern Spain. At Cadiz, Pearse boarded the ship, chartered by Fleming and laden with wines, which set sail on the 28th of November 1598. Sailing in winter, after several days they experienced a rough storm off the Bay of Biscay. Thereafter, Dunkirk pirates chased their ship. Approaching Ireland from the south, They first noted Cape Clear, near the southernmost tip of Ireland, and then proceeded along the coast eastwards. In a thick fog, the crew strayed off course. Landing near Howth, just outside Dublin, on the 28th of December 1598, Pearse and Sebastian Fleming were forced to climb the steep and dangerous headland there before reaching safety. Henry returned to a war-torn Ireland, racked by the closing years of the 9 Years' War. His landed estates shared in the general devastation. While working to restore his lands, Henry was also busy composing his travel memoir. It was completed sometime between late 1603 and summer 1605. Thus, this relation of a pilgrimage to Rome by one of the New English, generally Protestant colonial grouping in Ireland, a text largely unknown until recently, this text predates by several years the much better known Ulster Gaelic account of a similar journey. This latter recounted the continental odyssey of the defeated Ulster Earls who fled Ireland in September 1607, arriving in Rome in April 1608. Henry remained a Catholic, and as extensive landowner, he fulfilled the role of protector of Catholic life in his area, arranging for the limited repair of the ruined parish church, making it more fit for the communal celebration of Mass. Given his friendship with English Jesuits while on the continent, and his contacts with Father William Malone when back in Ireland, it was likely that Pearse was among those landowners who facilitated Jesuit missions in his area, which took place in spring 1616 and again in 1617. Henry died in December 1623 and was buried in the small chapel he erected on his estate close to his family home. His motive in writing, he tells us in the preface to the discourse, was to share his experiences of Rome with others and to provide some guidance for those who might undertake a similar journey. Pearse worked from notebooks, now lost, which he kept while travelling. In addition, as we saw, he used several recent publications: the book by Francini on the Roman churches, the work by Richard Knollys for the Battle of Lepanto, and for the Shrine of Loreto he drew on the publication by Jesuit Orazio Torsellini. We know of only one copy of the manuscript, conserved in the Bodleian, Oxford. Given his neighbourly relations with the Nugents Barons Delvin, it is probable that some of this family were among his readers. Richard Nugent, created first Earl of Westmeath in 1622, became the political leader of Irish Catholics in negotiations with the government in the 1620s and 1630s. The Earl travelled with his family to Rome in 1635. A further possible reader was the Dublin-based Jesuit and controversialist William Malone, a friend of Pearse. Another likely reader was the antiquary and government official Sir James Ware. Ware's son married a daughter of Henry Pearse and his wife Mary. Sometime around 1630, after Henry's death, Sir James acquired the manuscript for his collection, which he kept in Dublin. In this way, Henry's travel memoir survived the destruction of the Pearse home in the countrywide native uprising in winter 1641-2.
Many thanks, Father Brian, for an intriguing, fascinating account of an Elizabethan conversion. And many thanks to all who have joined us, both here in the library at Campion Hall in Oxford, and all those who've tuned in with the Casa della Cultura Irlandesi, the Irish Cultural Institute in Rome.
That was absolutely wonderful. Eve, over to you, Eve.
Hi. So that was really interesting, and thank you, Brian. And Brian is here with us today, well, this evening now. Brian, thank you for that talk. It sounds like there's an awful lot of research associated with that. Have we? I'm just looking. Have we got any? Let me have a look. Have we got any questions before I jump in with my own questions? Let me see. Okay, so Colin says to us, this photo shows Irish seminarians repeating the processional service in Rome, which Father Brian mentioned in his talk. Okay, have we got that photo? Ciara, can you see that photo? Or
I
we
can't, I'm afraid I can't.
Colin, maybe you could send us the photo. And then let me see, where's Brian? Brian, there you are.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Yes,
There you
thank
are.
you, Bria. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
So if anyone has any questions, maybe you could raise your hand or catch our attention, raise your hand through the Zoom method, or even type it into the messages. There we have. Oh yeah. This is from Colin, is it? Brian, I just want to ask a quick question before other people start jumping in. You mentioned the Vatican Library and the books being changed to the. I wouldn't dare steal a book from the Vatican Library. I mean,
Don't even think of it.
no, I mean, I think that even people thought about it then. But did Piers mention in his writings any particular books that he might have looked at in that library?
No, not really. I got the impression that, do you know, he was just doing like a sort of a tourist, sort of an early tourist visit, you know. He didn't seem to be involved in any kind of like strictly scholarly work, but he was just very open to the Roman experience and to you know, to see meeting people and seeing the sights and doing an awful lot of walking, you know, like he would have done the 7 churches, you know, 22 kilometers of a walk around Rome. You know, most people would take 4 or 5 hours over that, visiting the major basilicas, for example. So I think that just his visit to the Vatican Library was just part of the fact that he had someone who could bring him behind the scenes and like behind the curtains. You know, I think that was I think the height of his, from what I could see, the height of his engagement with the library.
That's so interesting, because it sounds like a little bit like today, you know, if you know somebody and you're away and they can get you behind the scenes, it's
I think
it's so
I
human.
think that was it. Yes.
And did you find any other similarities when you were reading, like, of his travel and even like your experience or our experience in the present day? Any similar kinds of experience?
Well, I would say just he was captivated, I think, by just the links with the early Christian Rome. You know, I think, if I understand correctly, it was really around the time he was there, or a little bit earlier, maybe the 1580s, that you know, the Roman authorities were really, if you like, re-engaging with the catacombs and with the actual what was left of the early Christian community in Rome, like things like relics and maybe as I say, the small chapels and that sort of thing. So he really was captivated by that. And then secondly, like he was also interested in he paid a little bit of attention to the Colosseum. And he actually said he went out and measured the Colosseum, you know, and he gave some sort of measurement. So I have this picture of him out, like pacing what would have been a kind of a big empty, you know, meadow surrounded by these ruined walls. Yeah, so that would be something that would be similar. I think what really struck me that was absent, he wasn't really interested in art. I said to myself, my God, Caravaggio was at work probably, around these years. And there's no mention. I started saying, my gosh, I might discover a secret, a new reference to Caravaggio. But no, he wasn't interested in those things, What he was, he was quite, if you like, religious in his interests, and that was his, if you like, his frame, so those were.
And I'm going to jump in again. If anybody has any questions, just make it known to us. Otherwise, I will hog Brian's time with all of my questions. So please do let us know if you have any questions. Brian. Oh yeah, Ciara, have you got something?
I just want to draw your attention to a comment here. That let me just open the comment box here. That Mary Jane Cryan has, or Crean, excuse me, Mary Jane, if I have not pronounced your surname correctly. So she mentions that it's interesting, the mention of the Nugent family of Westmeath, and that in 1860, Prince Val Nugent was one of the organizers of the Irish participation of the Italian Risorgimento battles. Mary Jane, there, I can see you there. Would you like to maybe jump in there?
I'm very interested in all of these Irish connections, even though I'm a second generation Irish living here in Italy, where I write books about travelers, early travelers. So this has been fascinating for me. And my most recent book came out 10 years ago. It's called The Irish and the English in the Italian Risorgimento, which was 1860. And just recently, the publication of the Italian edition has come out. And then Laval Nugent was a fascinating character, but I had no idea how old this family is, how far back. He lived in Vienna, and he was responsible for the participation of the Irish. He actually was working for the Austro-Hungarian emperor, but he spoke Gaelic, of course, and he spoke Irish to a Italian, because he's married with an Italian noble. And he was responsible for bringing the Irish soldiers, 1,000 of them, to Italy through Ancona, through Civitavecchia, to participate in the battles to keep the papal states running, to protect Pius IX. So this is it fits in very beautifully. 500 in the 1500s, and then we still have the Irish coming over, but for helping the papacy in 1860. So if you want, I'll send you a link, and you can listen to one of my talks that I've given when I presented this new book, the Italian edition. The English edition came out 10 years ago. The new Italian edition, because the Italians had no idea about this participation. So it's another little niche, a little special connection like the one that Brian is giving us this evening. So we've always been over here in Italy, the Irish. It's amazing. So it's a continual story. Fascinating. And thank you so much for this evening's talk. It was fascinating for me.
Great. That's great. Thank you. That's good. Have we any other questions? Ciara, you've got a question?
Yes, indeed. So, Brian, so Gurmila Maigit, Kate into my spatial. This is, I feel a little bit foolish asking this question, but I was left at the end confused as to whether or not Piers Henry, when he returned to Ireland, he returned a layman, or was he actually a priest when he returned? I wasn't sure.
He very much a layman.
Yes.
Like he returned to his wife. They went on to have 8 children. So that's the way it was.
Purely academic exercise. He was interested, as you mentioned. He was.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he as I say, I mentioned his lands. We have to imagine a kind of a war-torn countryside, because in that part of the Irish Midlands, that was like a corridor linking Ulster with the Hugh O'Neill and Hugh O'Donnell with the, if you like, the Gaelic those in the Gaelic people in revolt in Munster, like the O'Sullivan Bear, and people like that. So Hugh O'Neill and his companion would have been using the Shannon area as a corridor, military corridor. And obviously when they were using it as a military corridor, the soldiers had to be fed, their horses had to be fed, and the lands, like this was pretty much general in Ireland at the time, really would have been devastated because of the depredations of the soldiers, the need to keep the military machine fed and watered. And so when Henry returned, he really had to restock his lands. He had to reclaim his lands and build up the family's estates. He did that very well, because we know that by 1641 they had a thriving 3,000-acre estate. We also know that the family, 1641, they had a coach, which would have been most unusual coach, maybe 4 or 6 horses. So they were quite comfortable on the eve of the great native revolt of 1641. So those would have been his major preoccupations, and of course looking after his family, getting them settled, getting them married, making sure they married the right people, and all of that would have been part of his and his wife's concerns. Yeah.
Barry has a question. Barry, turn up the audio. Hold on, Barry.
Sure, so if it's yours.
Barry, your
Barry,
audio.
turn on your audio. Barry, your audio, you're muted. Barry, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just like to thank Brian for a very extremely interesting presentation, and I can just imagine what it was like in Rome in those days, and with all the pageantry and that, and a very thought-provoking presentation. That will help me to sleep tonight.
Good.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. And that's great. Any more? Have we got any more questions? So we have lovely messages coming in as well. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Hugh has a question.
Hugh has a question.
Right, Hugh. Yeah.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
Hugh, good to see you again.
Good to see
Thank
you
you
again.
for your little note.
Oh,
Thank
well,
you.
you're very welcome, Brian.
Yes, yes.
I just was absolutely blown away by it. I was just thinking that Cecil, like, you know, just thinking now that like it would be the work that Cecil D. DeMills would love to have got the hold of, because it would just be a fascinating. I you know, I love the travel stories, and I was just you know, glued to it. So I just want to express my deep appreciation for your work. I find it fascinating and love to read it. So just well done.
Thank you. Yes, yes, thank you.
And Aidan has his hand up.
Hi, Brian.
Hello, Aidan. Yes, and Ruth. Yes.
Hiya.
Good to see you.
Just wondering, Brian, thank you for that talk. It's been fascinating. How did Henry's family react to all of this? In terms of, you know, him going over to Rome and becoming Catholic, and how did the family take that, either on his return or while he was away? Do we know anything about that?
Well, he does allude to some messages, some news that filters through to Rome about. He speaks about his. I think it was the death of his either one of his. I think it might have been his mother, death of one of his parents, and you know, he got word of that obviously some months after the event when he was in Rome, and that disturbed him. He was quite sad about that. He also got word of the devastation that was taking place in Ireland and on his own lands because of the war. He was aware of that at the time. But really, there is no, these are only very indirect hints, you know, of his, of any contacts with Ireland while he was over there. He valued very deeply meeting people that he would have known, or whose families he would have known, like Francis, the friar Francis Nugent. But also, and I didn't include this, but when he was in Spain, I think it may have been in Valladolid, he met actually a young man who was a neighbor of his and probably a contemporary, who was a Catholic seminarian student while he was there. And he spoke quite warmly about this guy, and of his, then Pierce spoke of his sadness when he had heard sometime afterwards that the young man had died, you know, which was quite normal at the time, that people would die in their you know, in the early adulthood. It would have been quite, yeah. So, but I was quite struck by that here you had a man from with a you know, English colonial background, but apparently quite a warm friendship growing up as boys in County Westmeath, and with this other guy who was from a kind of a Gaelic Irish background, and in some way or another they encountered each other once again while they were both on the continent in Spain, you know. But these are, yeah, so those are some little pictures, you know, yes, of that, yeah. About that, yeah. His father-in-law was furious with him for becoming Catholic, and there was a huge row with his father-in-law. His father-in-law was the Archbishop of Dublin. There was a question of the custody of the children in 1607, 1608. You know, we don't really hear fully the end of the story, but you can see that it was quite stormy. That was quite stormy. Yes. So yes, there are, I think there are just hints of some of these situations in the documents afterwards. Yes.
Just on that, Brian, he would have known, of course, that he was going to come back. I didn't realize who his father-in-law was. You say his father-in-law was the Archbishop of Dublin.
Yes, of Dublin. Yes.
So there was a lot of tension, obviously, when he came. Putting it mildly, I suppose.
That's right.
But would such a well-traveled person, I suppose, did he come back because of his duties towards the lands? Would he not have been tempted to stay away and bring his family to other places?
Well, no, I don't. There's no sense that he ever that he really intended to settle. He was doing the if you like, the visitor or tourist experience. Because I think we have to remember that he had a lot to go back to. Unlike most young people who had to leave Ireland, they had very little to go back to return to in Ireland. So he had quite a stake in the local scene. He would have been, if you like, a local government official before he left in his early 20s, a seneschal, you know, sort of an official who would look after getting supplies for the army, looking after a little bit of what we would call magistrates type duties. So although he was a young man, he was already well established. He was the heir. He was going to come into this property that the father had acquired. So he had a lot to go back to. And obviously his wife.
Yes.
They already had a couple of children before he left. Yes.
Just avoid the in-laws for a while.
Yeah, well, see the world, like that. Yes. Indeed.
And we got another question.
I'd like to ask a question. Yes. How did his family come to acquire the property in County Westmeath?
Right. His father, William Pierce, was a constable in Carrickfergus, County Antrim, in the 1560s. there was some tension between him and some other officials, and I think the father decided that it would be better for him to move to another front part of the Gaelic frontier with the Pale. So he acquired a grant of the dissolved Augustinian priory of Tristernagh, which is located on the northwestern corner of County Westmeath. So he acquired a crown grant of this dissolved monastery and its lands. So that's how he came to be there, how the family came to be in County Westmeath. He acquired that probably as far as the late 1560s. And then the family moved down then shortly afterwards to live in the old priory there. Yeah.
When you say acquired, would he have bought the grant, or?
He would have, because of his role as a crown agent, he would have got from the crown, he would have got the deeds, if you like, of that particular property. So he didn't. It would have been a grant that he acquired by virtue of his services to the crown. So he would not have bought. It would have been granted to him.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
We have a question from Mary Jane Cryan, and that is, did he mention, and I was wondering about this, I'm glad somebody else asked, did he mention anything about food and wine and on his travels, when you're away?
Yes, he gave a detailed description of the breakfast in the English college, and he uses words. I had to look them up in the Oxford English Dictionary to find out what they were, but it seemed very like some sort of not just the cheapest of bread, but quite refined breads and wine. I got the impression that they were quite well, he wasn't complaining about the food, and he was, he didn't like. I think the one that I from memory that sticks in my mind is the description of the breakfast, because I had to look up these words to find out.
So what we're saying, like Italian food was good then, and it still is now. But it wasn't cold porridge or anything.
Well, it was this refined, very classy breads, as far as I could see. Yes. No, but he doesn't go for great descriptions of the food. But he does talk about, Christmas time and the kind of what would you call them? The little sketches, drama sketches or theatricals or music that the young students used to perform. And apparently there might have been the college authorities might have wanted to cut down on these theatricals, but the young men insisted that they wanted to have the same type of Christmas as they would have had in their home place in England, with all these sort of sketches or musicals or a bit of sort of,
rowdy behavior, rowdiness, probably.
A little bit of it verges on that.
Caroling.
Yes, it seems to verge a little bit on that, but it's tantalizing because there's just a few references, and you sort of wonder, what did that look like?
Yes.
But he didn't give a detailed description of that in the college. Yeah.
And just another question, that is, was the English college on Via de Monserrato?
Yes, the same site. Yes, that's the incredible thing. It's the same site from 1361 or whatever, the early 1360s. Yes, it's this. Yes, I found that quite moving to just to walk around that and to say, well, look, this is where Henry would have, and his the young guy he came with, Philip Draycott, from Derbyshire, like that they would have, lived in that particular and the same premises, at the same address, if you like. Yes.
Amazing.
Until today. Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Mm.
And I just say, Ciara, have you got any questions there? I was looking at Ciara's screen. No, no, no. I had to.
I was just actually thinking, Eve, that Brian has been so very, very kind and generous with his time, and also all of our guests for joining us, and that maybe we might allow Brian to draw breath, and our guests to perhaps reflect on his lovely night, to go and just mull over all the vivid images that Brian has left us with, really, really such an interesting and vivid account of, of a layman's travels in Rome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Play Brian. Yes. Good Jackson. Svalum Castle. Earn Doisha.
On Hestel Priest.
Yeah. Tall.
Great.
We'll catch the Dinyaganage and we'll catch the Gatan. No, I misheard. So Eve, shall we wrap up, or I'm leaving it up to you? You're the vanity tonight.
Well, yeah, if there's any more questions, jump in, or we'll wrap it up. And thank you everyone for attending, and for Brian for being so generous with your time and for sharing that fabulous talk. It looked amazing as well. Campion Hall, isn't it Campion Hall in Oxford? It looks fantastic. The library looks very inviting. So thank you very, very much. And I think will we call it a night and have sweet dreams now?
Indeed. So everybody, thank you for joining. Well, again, round of applause for Brian. First of all, Brian, my who, my who, and that was just marvelous evening. We do hope that you will join us again after Christmas. So the next event will be sometime in January. We hope to have an Iha Arniel. So it should be a mixture of music, singing, poetry, and any of you who have any party pieces, any musicians, singers out there, you are more than welcome to join in as well. So please get in contact with us. And so the best for the we would Christmas like period, at the Casa de la Cultura or Aras Egg, we'd like to wish you all a very happy Christmas. Nolag Warway, agus Tanti Aguri.
Thank you, boy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was making all the directing
from
Australia, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning over there.
And
Thank you.
And Eve.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Ciao.